But then we get the new left in the 1960s. We get the fall of the Berlin Wall in the 1990s, in 1989, and then into the 90s. And we get a rise, and because I teach at a university, I'm surrounded by this. We get a rise of a new set of sacred values around racism, sexism, oppression, and basically the sacred victim. And this is the clash, this is part of the clash. If you have a group, if you have groups on the left whose essentially their religion is fighting racism, well, that's a very admirable thing to do. But if it becomes a religion, you become fundamentalist, now everything that contradicts that must fall. It is like a new religion.
My concern is doing away with whiteness. Whiteness is a form of racial oppression, sure. The suggestion is that it is somehow possible to separate whiteness from oppression, and it is not. There can be no white race without the phenomenon of white supremacy. If you abolish slavery, you abolish slaveholders. In the same way, if you abolish racial oppression, you do away with whiteness. Treason to whiteness is loyalty to humanity.
Your views are fairly well received in academia.
Yes, they're legitimate, not to say that everyone agrees, but sure. I could not point to any examples where it has provoked political censorship. Whiteness is an identity that arises entirely out of oppression. Whiteness is not a culture, it's not a religion, it's not a language, it's simply an oppressive social category. Blackness is an identity that can be plausibly argued. Black studies is a study of a people that has formed itself in resistance to its oppression. The task is to bring this minority together in such a way that it makes it impossible for the legacy of whiteness to continue to reproduce itself.
The new religion, one of the new religions, is all about diversity and inclusion.
But I believe you came here because you agree that we owe the black community an apology. For me as a white man, I'm gonna own that. We ask for forgiveness from our black brothers and sisters for years and years of racism, of systematic racism, of bigotry, of hate. On behalf of the white race, of the brown race, we stand in solidarity, God. We take a knee and salute to them, we honor them.
So you have the dawn of this new religion, which in my view is extremely illiberal.
You've never experienced oppression in your entire fucking life. Neither have I. You don't know me. You're fucking a white male. So? You're a white man.
I think we're live. Hello everyone, how are you doing? Okay, yes, I can see all chat, and believe me, have celebrities ended racism with their social media activism? I didn't think it was possible. Right, who have we got next?
I think probably James Corden.
James Corden. Right.
You remember his
Yeah. He posted like an 8-minute, well, someone posted this 8-minute ramble. I'm going to start at about 2 minutes in because he spends the first couple of minutes just basically saying, oh, I'm white and therefore I shouldn't talk about this. So
this is our problem to solve. How can the black community dismantle a problem that they didn't create?
Right. Already I'm pissed off. This is our problem to solve. The black community can't do it. It's okay, James. That sounds a lot like the white man's burden. Like that sounds a lot like the noble white man spreading civilization around the planet and raising up the benighted people of color, as you might call them, around the world. I don't think that we actually should be carrying the white man's burden anymore, James. I'm sorry. I'm just really progressive like that.
This weekend we saw many peaceful protesters demanding an end to the murder of black Americans.
He's not going to acknowledge the riots, is he?
Of police officers who have killed, demanding votes for change, demanding justice. And we saw anger. And of course people are angry. Black Americans have spent hundreds of years desperately making the case for their own humanity and have been relentlessly and often brutally silenced.
Okay, fuck's sake. So he's not going to acknowledge that 17 people have been killed by these riots, is he?
Oh, why would he?
And I love the black people have spent hundreds of years. No black person has spent hundreds of years doing anything, James. Sorry to nitpick. Fucking.
And so here we are. Protests across America. These protests, they have to result in change. Because when athletes took a knee peacefully at a football game, the vice president stood up and walked out of that stadium rather than see that protest. Now a policeman takes a knee to a man's neck and our leadership hide in a bunker rather than see this protest.
There is there is something deeply ironic about the taking a knee thing after the police officers used the knee to kill George Floyd. I mean, it seems like the kind of prank that 4chan would pull. Say,
what the fuck?
you know, George Floyd was killed with this police officer with the knee on his neck, so we all need to take a knee. It's like, I don't like the optics of this.
No, I can imagine someone can turn that into a prank now.
Yeah, I think it looks really bad. But the worst part about it for me is the whole idea of taking a knee, bending the knee, is an act of submission to someone else. And if that's what's being demanded, my answer is no, never bend the knee, ever. In fact, the very act of asking someone to bend the knee to you is, in my opinion, a massive moral affront to that person's agency and independence as their own person. It seems to imply that, in fact, they should be your vassal and they should do as you say. And I really can't stand that. So never bend the knee, ever. You only ever apologize unless you think you've done something wrong. And the cringy hordes of Californian white people who are like, oh, I'm bending knee to the black people. You are awful and you are setting race relations back, in my opinion. There's plenty of racism in the UK institutionally. For years, a minority of our population has been persecuted by the police when they interact, if they even come to begin with. Punished for who they are and their skin colour and their age. White girls. Well,
yeah, did you see Question Time yesterday?
I didn't actually. How was it?
Right, I didn't bother watching the show because the show was pointless. It always is. But the social media of Question Time, something else. Every single post they made, every single comment was justice for Ellie, justice for Ellie, justice for Ellie, grooming gangs, grooming gangs.
Yeah.
Like one of the posts was asking, do we have this kind of racial bigotry in the UK? And just every response was grooming gangs, grooming gangs, grooming gangs. They're never going to address it.
For anyone wondering, the grooming gang report has still not been released. Don't know why. They could release it at any time. They could just put it on social media. Just share it around. Let us see it. I just want to know what you found. And when it turns out that what they found is they found racial and religious supremacy that targeted specific kinds of young girls because of what they are, then we can have a conversation about that. We can have a talk about how racism can go both ways, can't we? You know, but until they do that, I think that we're kind of stuck being the fringe far rightists saying, look, maybe there's a problem with gangs of adult men who rape children for racial and religious reasons. And maybe those people do actually deserve justice. Maybe those victims do deserve to see those people either in jail or deported if they're dual citizens. You know, I mean, I'm just saying, one day history's going to look back on this and think, wow, we were mad. I can't believe we just sold these people out because we didn't want to be called names. Let's have a listen to what was it Logan Paul has to say about this now. This has had 14 million views, this video.
Listen closely. One of my biggest learnings from all of this, and I'm embarrassed that it's taken me 25 years to realize this. It is not enough to be not racist. You have to be anti-racist.
Yes.
Condemn those who feign superiority because of the color of their skin. Friends, hold friends accountable. Hold your family accountable. Hold yourself accountable. And most importantly, we must hold our authorities accountable. Police officers, politicians, policymakers. As Killer Mike said, bully the politicians at the voting booth. Make your voice heard.
Oh God, stop, Jesus Christ. Right. How many people have been killed in these riots so far?
17 and counting.
17 people. That's just brilliant.
Sadly, 2 of them were black police officers. 1 killed by looters, 1 domestic terrorist killed him, as I understand.
Yep.
So more black lives have been killed in these protests than what we are protesting.
Well, there we go. Right, let's carry on with Logan Paul. He's only got a minute left.
Attend a
I've
protest.
just seen Voltaire's ghost, but is he a hostage?
Sorry?
Voltaire's ghost has put in the chat, is he a hostage? I mean,
Logan Paul?
yeah.
Yeah, he's ideologically possessed. He's not thinking anymore. He's pounding his fist. Let me just finish this.
If you're white, if you look like me, use your privilege. And for those who do not think white privilege exists, you are fucking blind. You are delusional, and you are part of the problem. I can count on 0 hands the amount of times that I have feared for my life at a routine traffic stop. That has never happened. Half of the reason I'm able to get away with some of my hooligan shit I do in my vlogs is because I'm a white kid. I'm confident that I do not have to fear for my life should the cops show up. Acknowledge and weaponize your privilege. I believe we're going to a protest today. You can bet your fucking ass I'll be in the front line. Knowing all this about America, its racially charged background, its inability to truly treat humans as equals, even after 244 years since its inception, we must now work towards finding the solution. And if you are an influencer or a celebrity friend of mine, I hope you are using your platform to continue to spread the message of solidarity and unity. I do not have all the answers, but I know we must now reverse engineer the system as a collective. We must open our eyes and realize that there is only one race, and that is the human race. On behalf of Breonna Taylor, we must change. On behalf of Ahmaud Arbery, we must advance. And on behalf of George Floyd and the hundreds of others who have been unjustly murdered in this country, we must evolve.
Wow. Okay, I mean, like Chris Hicks has said, he sounds like the Communist Party vanguard during Mao's Cultural Revolution. And that's exactly how he sounds to me. He totally subverted by communism. We need to deconstruct the system. It's like, dude, you're a fucking celebrity brainlet. You don't know anything about the system. This is why I hate this. Like, we need to deconstruct everything. It's like, okay, but you don't have a plan to build anything. And so we're going to be left in the ruins of our civilization, and that will be the end. We're all one race, the human race. It's like, okay, so there's no such thing as black then. The black race is no longer a thing. They're just the human race, right? Okay. So
yeah,
doesn't
I saw a lot of signs like that at Reading today.
Yeah, doesn't that erase Black Lives Matter?
Destroys the whole movement. What's the point in it?
Okay, well, yes, we are all one race, the human race. I agree with you, Logan Paul.
All lives matter is what you're saying there.
I agree that all lives matter. Oh, God. Joe Biden's statement regarding George Floyd came away with this incredible sense of what an incredible guy he was. George Floyd, previously arrested for armed robbery, held a pregnant woman at gunpoint with 4 other men. Why is he a martyr for them? Good question. I honestly, though, I think that it's because in the left-wing view, essentially their martyrs all become saints. They're very much like Catholicism. Like you notice they're canonized. Like Jake Paul went through a bunch of them. You know, he was giving the names of them. Let me just skip back quickly. Yeah, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, or whoever it is. I don't know anything about these people, but it doesn't matter. You know, these have become the secular saints of the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's in their memory that things must be honored. I think that the media narrative has been so persistent and so drilled down to a fine art for the people who are proposing it, that it doesn't really matter what you say to those people at that point. I think that at that point, they are just not listening. And if you say anything that doubts any aspect of their worldview, then you are outside of the cult and you have been identified as the villain. Because I think this is a cult. I mean, this is definitely cult behavior. Demonize outsiders, worship your internal goal and your leaders. And never question the orthodoxy. Never look at anything else.
Where's the evidence of racial element in this case? Like, it's a clear case of police brutality, but I'm unaware of any evidence yet about race.
No.
And yet, even just asking that question to certain people will get them very riled up.
And the fact that it happened, it was a white guy to a black guy. That's all. That's all it matters.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's all the evidence you need.
I used to be racist like you, then I took a social justice to the knee. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing how you can be racist one day and you didn't even realize, and then suddenly all you have to do is say, you know what, white people are the problem, and then you're an anti-racist. The most frustrating part of the Black Lives Matter zeitgeist right now, for me, is that for years I've been told that I'm not allowed an opinion on racism because I'm white. Suddenly now these same ideologues are demanding our aid and in some cases our submission. found a definition of white privilege, which is unearned blame. The idea that American police are hunting down blacks is a lie perpetrated by the media, selectively highlighting interracial incidents where blacks are the victims. I'm not saying police brutality doesn't exist. I'm saying the race narrative is a lie. Bing. Got it. That's exactly it. There's no easy solution. I mean, it's turning into something of a kind of police state with regards to social justice, isn't it? You know, I mean, there was LinkedIn. I watched Tim Pool's video about it earlier, how they were doing some, you know, anonymous notes or whatever, or a message board on a LinkedIn forum and a call. And it sounded like it was like 4chan, with people going like, I'm all lives matter. I disagree with Black Lives Matter. I disagree with all this stuff. And it was described as like a meltdown or a car crash or something, because it's just not. It's a dominant narrative, but it's not supported by the majority of the public. You know. So, but I don't envy you. You are. I hear a lot. I get a lot of these messages too. That, you know, I'm trapped in a place that it's only okay to promote the politically correct narrative. What can I do? And the answer is not much yet. You know, we need to keep pushing upwards. Any advice? Don't be a hero, right? Like, just support the growth of the things that you like. You know, if someone is doing a Kickstarter or GoFundMe or something for a cause you support it. You know, share. Well, not necessarily share if you don't have the opportunity, but like, just do whatever it is that seems safe to support the media and creators that you like. And I don't mean me, obviously. I just mean generally, because they're not being treated fairly by the establishment, and they will need your help. You know, you've got to talk to people that you trust in order to be able to, like, form a network of people who you can talk to this stuff about. Find anyone else who's, like, you know, when they're blaring the diversity quoted bullshit over whatever it is, they just, you know, if anyone rolls their eyes, you know, start asking them why they're, you know, try and get it out of them. We're not going anywhere, right? We're not going anywhere. I understand that for a lot of people, this is cathartic and kind of self-help. Say, look, I so many messages going, man, if it wasn't for you, I would feel like I was alone, and I would feel like I was surrounded by these idiots in my workplace, and we've seen other super chats about it, and I would feel despair. And it's like, yeah, I get you, man. That's why I started doing this, right? Because in my workplace, they started bringing in these feminist initiatives, and I was like, this is wrong. Just, we're not going anywhere. Don't do anything crazy, and look after yourself. This is a long game, and we have to ride it out. The more and more I hear about Black Lives Matter in the midst of all the riots, and seeing the footage of what the patrons said in the riots are doing, I find myself with a growing detest for black people. I've been surrendering more to the wrong thinkers of late. Please help. It's not black people. It's people who identify as black Americans. The American black identity is very peculiar to America. It is being exported, but it was born and bred in America by the leftists there. And it's being exported, but it's not universally what black people are. Like, it's whether they think of themselves as black first or Americans first. It's very much like the Muslim identity. Are you a Muslim first or a Brit first, you know? And I can understand why you don't want someone who's like a black nationalist pounding their fist and going, white people are the problem. But there are, you know, so many black people who are just not like that. So don't fall into the trap, because when you allow them to say, look, this is what black people are, then you've fallen. You've let them win. And suddenly they now have a monopoly on black people. And you're like, oh no, I've got to stay away from all of that. But there are so many people who are on your side in that regard. Like the chap earlier that we read about, he's like the family man, you know, he's got his job, he's got his home, he's got his family, he wants to get on with his life. Like, don't just let them have that guy as part of their domain. It's not fair. It's not fair to him. And it's not fair to those people who are not like that. So, and they're turning you into something that you probably don't want to be. So don't let them win. I'm getting so tired of being the only dissenting voice surrounded by leftists in my uni. They keep me around as a token right-winger, but I fear losing friends if I ever truly push back. What can I do to challenge them without casting me out? Again, like with the other one, you've got to be incremental and make sure you're putting down firm foundations, right? Things that already are at least in some way intersecting with their worldview, but also present problems further on. I do the same with my sister's boyfriend. He's a really nice guy, but he's basically a communist. And so whenever we always have really interesting intellectual conversations though. But I'm always certain that I've defended my position satisfactorily, and that he hasn't been able to push back, and that he's gone away considering something. I'm sure he has, and he's a really nice guy. It's just politically we just totally disagree. Have you seen both of Lou Levi's videos on Floyd? Yes. American police don't have a race problem. American blacks have a behavior problem. Yes. And that's the sort of thing I'd say on Question Time. It's about behavior. And this is why American police aren't persecuting, say, the Chinese community or the Indian community. They're not persecuting any of these communities because these communities behave responsibly. There's nothing to persecute. But that is, they do have a behavior problem. I agree. This is why I was saying that the ethics of the community are the problem. They're very bad. I think they're very unhealthy. I think the Democrats constantly reinforcing it and ladling it on them, like ladling it on, like, layer and layer and layer of, constant going on about the victimhood. There's no, I think it's a cruel thing to do. I think you trap, I think it is predatory by the Democratic Party as well.
My serious political philanthropy started in South Africa, where I visited Soweto and generally got to know South Africa from the black population, not the white one.
How much of this stuff was speeded up, at least, by people like George Soros, people, sort of left-wing ideologues who believe in open borders and helping out, encouraging more refugees to come?
Huge amount. And I say this carefully because there are people who, as it were, go nuts on the Soros thing and attribute him to sort of like the modern Rothschild blaming. There's an unpleasant tinge in the air sometimes around Soros. But if you look at what he and his NGOs did during the crisis of 2015, it was a wicked, wicked thing. And the fact that Viktor Orban in Hungary publicly named Soros, he got a huge amount of criticism for this, but he was right, I think. George Soros is meddling in Hungarian affairs, that the country's richest and most famous son should have been campaigning to there was a moment when there was exchange in which Viktor Orban blamed Soros, and Soros responded, yes, he is right to identify it, because, as Soros said in a statement, that Orban thinks the refugees are the problem and that the borders are the solution. We think differently. We think that the refugees are the solution and the borders are the problem. Soros's NGOs, and I've seen this on the front lines in the migrant camps, have been over the years helping migrants not just to come into Europe, but to lie when they get here about who they are. Yeah. They're taught via apps and via websites. You can see the websites. Many of them are still up. And by leaflets and other means, they are shown how to beat the system. Not that the system in Europe works very well at all. The whole system, as I show in the book, was defunct and broken by the time that the 2015 movement happened. But very quickly, this goes back to a point you raised earlier, and I didn't actually answer, which is a very interesting and important point about where is different in Europe. And of course, one of the fundamental questions about the migration crisis of 2015 and the period before and since is, why has the East behaved differently?
Yes, Poland,
Slovakia, Hungary. Here's an interesting one. Viktor Orban, I think everyone would agree, is a right-wing leader. Neighbouring in Slovakia, Robert Fico is a left-wing leader. Now, the Prime Minister of Slovakia and the Prime Minister of Hungary agree absolutely on the migrants question and on the Islam and identity question, despite being right-wing in Hungary, left-wing in Slovakia. Why is this? This is a fascinating subject to me because there are very specific reasons, including the fact that the vast majority of the publics there are totally opposed to the mass migration and support their leaders in opposing it. But another reason I would submit, or another two reasons I submit, are firstly, that Eastern Europe remembers some of this better. That in the East, where armies in the past came in, remember this thing in particular. And a second reason is that they have something that Western Europeans have lost. I say in the book, if you were to boil it down to something, it would be that Eastern Europe still retains the tragic sense of life, and that Western Europeans have lost it utterly. We think we've got time off from history. We wish everything away on a tide of human progress. We pretend we don't die. We pretend that the point of life is to acquire more and more things and go on nice holidays. And Eastern Europeans have remembered you don't get time off from history, and that you may be swept away from one direction and then swept away from another, and you ought to be careful with your society.
Freedom isn't free, as the Americans would put it. You're listening to Dellingpole, the podcast with me, James Dellingpole, and my very special guest, Douglas Murray, author of many excellent books, the latest being The Strange Death of Europe.
Today I would like to speak about the migration crisis. This issue will determine the future of our political family. We are in a deep trouble. The migration crisis is able to destabilize governments, countries, and the whole European continent. We need a strong, clear-cut answer, timetable, and action plan of EPP. The Hungarian delegates welcomed the resolution of the Congress declaring that the Spanish approach is the right one. Dear friends, the danger we have been facing demands open and honest speech. First of all, what we have been facing is not a refugee crisis. This is a migratory movement composed of economic migrants, refugees, and also foreign fighters. This is an uncontrolled and unregulated process. I would like to remind you that free choice of a host country is not included in the international law. I also want to underline that there is an unlimited source of supply of people after Syria, Iraq, Pakistan, Afghanistan. Africa is now also on the move. The dimensions and the volume of the danger is well above our expectations. Dear colleagues, this is the right time to make clear the nature and the dimension of our moral responsibility. We are Christian Democrats, so the issue of moral responsibility must also be put high into consideration. We have a heartfelt compassion for the people who left their homes. They are victims of the bad governance of their own countries. They are victims of bad international political decisions. And they are victims of our bad European policy as well, which raises expectations that are impossible to be fulfilled. And they are obviously victims of the human traffickers. But considering them victims must not turn ourselves into being victims. Just because we do not consider them enemies, we must not act against ourselves. Our moral responsibility is to give back these people their homes and their countries. It can't be our objective to provide them with a new European life. Right to human dignity and security are basic rights. But neither the German, Austrian, nor the Hungarian way of life is a basic right of all people on the earth. It is only a right of those ones who have contributed to it. Europe is not able to accept everyone who wants a better life. We have to help them to get back their own lives with dignity, and we have to send them back to their own countries. Dear colleagues, let me draw your kind attention to the fact that European Christian democratic approach does not tolerate any anti-Muslim policy. Muslim faith, which we honor and respect, is not responsible for the root causes of this mass migratory movement. Dear delegates, we cannot avoid speaking about the quality of our democracies. Does it comply with the freedom of information and speech that media usually show women and children, why 70% of the migrants are young men and they look like an army? How could it happen that our people feel that their opinion is not being put into consideration? And we have to address the question whether our people want what has been happening. Did we get authorization from them to allow millions of migrants to enter our continent? Did we get authorization not to comply with the Schengen regulations for months? No, distinguished delegates, we did not. And it is not a convincing argument anymore that what we have been doing is because of emergency. I believe we have to gather all our courage. We have to throw away political correctness, and we should launch a big debate. We have to discuss our own intentions regarding our own continent without hypocrisy and Phariseeism. What do we think about our civilization heritage? Can the change of cultural pattern force externally? Do we accept parallel societies? Or we defend our tolerant and rule of law-based way of life we have lived so far? Dear delegates, Europe is currently rich and weak. This is the most possibly dangerous mixture. We seem not to be able to overcome our challenges on our own. Turkey is an important strategic partner, but if based on the lack of our own power, we expect the solution from them, that will make us exposed. This is the current situation of Europe. If we do not want that, we have to protect our borders. If we are unable to do so at Greece, which is the eastern gate of the Balkans and the first line of defense, then we have to do it at the western gate of the Balkans, at Hungary and Slovenia. Dear friends, we cannot hide the fact that the European left has a clear agenda. They are supportive to migration. They actually import future leftist voters to Europe, hiding behind humanism. It is an old trick, but I do not understand why we have to accept it. They consider registration and protection of borders bureaucratic, nationalist, and against human rights. They have a dream about the politically constructed world society without religious traditions, without borders, and without nations. They attack core values of our European identity, family, nation, subsidiarity, and responsibility. Dear friends, we are EPP. Our behavior should not be determined by opinion of our rivals. We are a strong and great party. The stronger the attack, the stronger we need to fight back. We need to be ready to fight for our principles. We have to be innovative as well. In the rise of the new crisis, the old ways do not work anymore. We need courage and new experiments, even if not every idea we try succeeds. But it should not stop us from trying. And we should not attack those who are trying. I thank for our president and for sister parties who defended us Hungarians in the difficult times when we offered new solutions. Dear friends, we are the European People's Party, Parti Populaire, Volkspartei, Partido Popular, Party of the People. Our responsibility is towards the people. Listen to the people. Let's be determined. Let's defend Europe. Do not let the leftists mess up and reconstruct Europe. And do not let them oust the soul of Europe. Do not let the rebels and socialists take away Europe from the people. Thank you very much for your attention.